The wilderness, in relating it to our walk, represents sinful nature that we all are born into. And then we become a Christian. We ask God to come in, and he makes us new. And and it's amazing. We've now said yes to the King, and we're free. So our sinful nature, the wilderness, we are bound to it until that happens. Imagine like you're chained up, and you're like hooked to it, and you're just like looking out the rest of the wilderness, but you're just like stuck there. You can't move. You ask God to come in, them chains come off. But see, God doesn't take those chains off, and this is where we often miss it, and then pick you up and move you over to the promised land. That's not what happens. What happens is he unhooks your chains. And then you're still in the wilderness. You're still surrounded by sinful nature. The difference is now you're not bound to it. Now you have a choice. Now there's freedom, okay? And it all comes back to the whole reason he does things the way he does, and that's because he wants us to want him, you know? He could, again, just like with them, he could have brought them straight to the promised land, but what would they learn? How would they grow? It's all for their good. What goes, is going to happen to them, but that wouldn't have happened if he just gave them what they wanted. Same with us. He can unhook us from the sinful nature, the wilderness, and put us right into the great times of the rest of our life. But what would we learn? How would we grow? And would we even really, or would we just take it for granted? So he unbinds us from our sinful nature, and we're still here. We just keep on living our lives like we normally do, except, this time we're like, we like you, God. We believe in you. We expect some like magical, revelational thing to happen, and sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you're like, I invite you in, and you have this really amazing moment when the chains come off, but then you do nothing about it, and then you go back to your everyday life, and now you're like, now what? What do I do now? Because unfortunately, you still live here. And then you end up repeating the same circles that got you into that place before where you were chained up. And it brings us back to that place of desperation. Israel was literally in bondage. They were slaves. And God freed them. And that was great. And then he moved them into the wilderness. And as we're going to continue to read, is that we find out that Israel wasn't the most, let me see the proper word here. They weren't the most grateful of a bunch. And they continued to move through, they started their journey into the wilderness. And they left desperate for him, and then they continually stay in that place of desperation. So they leads them into this place, and they're being pursued. So now they're in this place where they're still desperate. They're in the wilderness, but the problem hasn't gone away. So they've been unchained from Pharaoh. They've left the problem. In their sense, it was Pharaoh. And they're now moving through the wilderness, running from Pharaoh. And he's pursuing them. And what I found interesting about this point, and we often do this, and we repeat this pattern, but Pharaoh was pursuing them. So he was the thing that cuffed them, and he was pursuing them still, even after they were freed. And what he said to me when I read that line was that often in life, we will be uncuffed from something or unhooked from something or unchained from something, but that's not where it ends, because it will continue to pursue you. And it'll continue to pursue you until it wears you down. And then ultimately, once you're wore down and it starts to look good, because the enemy doesn't just pursue you with like ravenous anger, pursues you with like, yeah, man, you know you want that. And you start to think about picking it back up, whatever that chain was, and you put it back on, and before you know it, you're now rechained back up. And you're in this place where you're now desperate again. So let's see what they did. So it says in Exodus 15, 22 through 26. Then Moses led the people of Israel away from the Red Sea, and they moved out. Oh, I skipped a part. Hold on. So yeah, backtrack. Like I said, they were being pursued, and he chased them to the Red Sea. You guys all know their story. They get to the Red Sea. They're like, oh, we're going to die. And then, God, through Moses, parts the Red Sea. Boom, they travel through. It collapses on them, and yay, dude's dead. Happy ending, right? No, it's not over yet. So then Moses led the people of Israel away from the Red Sea, and they moved out into the desert of Shur. They traveled in this desert for 3 days without finding any water. When they came to the oasis of Marah, the water was too bitter to drink. So they called the place Marah, which means bitter. Then the people complained and turned against Moses. What are we going to drink? They demanded. So Moses cried out to the Lord, help. And the Lord showed him a piece of wood. Moses threw it into the water, and this made the water good to drink. It was there at Marah that the Lord set before them the following decree as a standard to test their faithfulness to him. He said, if you will listen carefully to the voice of the Lord, your God, and do what is right in his sight, obeying his commands and keeping all his decrees, then I will not make you suffer any of the disease I sent on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. So, 3 days. They made it 3 days, y'all. They were in back up to the beginning where it says 3 days. Then Moses led the people of Israel away from the Red Sea, and they moved out into the desert of Shur. They traveled in this desert for 3 days without finding water. Now, I will say, to their defense, you get pretty thirsty after 3 days. But they just saw this guy part a whole sea and smack it on some people. And they dead now. Those people, big dead. And they over here already in this place of doubt, in this place of complaining, they can't just trust at this point. But no, they're like 3 days, I'm already mad, and I'm ready to quit this little journey that the Lord has us on. That's how they feel already. Already, 3 days in. The Lord provides a test or plan to help them. The Lord provides a test or plan to help them. And then because of that, they're allowed, they're able to get some water, and they're able to move on and get through it all, and everything's fine. The only issue is they're still repeating the same pattern. So they're still repeating the same pattern. So they're desperate, and then they ask the Lord for help. Lord helps them. And then that desperation is taken care of, and they're fine. And then, yes, yay, we're good. We don't need anything from you anymore, God. Go away. And how often in life do we sit in this place of desperation? We sit in this place of, Lord, I really need you here. I really need your healing. I really need your financial whatever. I really need you to come through here, God. I'm super desperate for you. And maybe he does. And then we're like, awesome. Thank you. I'm going to go right back to everything that got me desperate. We do. I do. I'm a prefix with saying that this whole sermon I'm preaching to myself too. And we got to be better, because I can't tell you how many prayer meetings, talking with people, sitting in places where I've said to the Lord, Lord, I'm desperate for you. I need to change. I'm sorry. Forgive me. If you come through here, you know what? I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm gonna stop that way of life, and I'm gonna change, and I'm gonna move away from it, whatever. And maybe I do for a second. Maybe I hold out for a second. Maybe I'm in this awesome place where like the Lord's moving, and I'm just like, yes, yes. But then somewhere along the line, I stop. I get a little lax with it because he came through. Things are good. And then all of a sudden, those chains start looking more appealing. And then you start to like get convinced and lied to, and you're like, man, when I had those chains on, I was actually, I was happy. It was fun, you know. It was fun to drink on the weekends, you know, with like my good friends. Like nothing bad really happened. You know what I mean? It was good times. I mean, yeah, sure. You know, I did get into that fight, or yeah, sure, I did think about cheating, or maybe I did, you know. Yeah, sure. And then before you know it, these little things that you were chained to segue into other things, and you repeat these patterns, and then now you're like, your marriage is falling apart, you're addicted to alcohol, you're in this place, and you're like, what happened? I'm desperate. Lord, where are you? And he's like, I've already unchained you from this thing like 8 times. Why do you keep going back to it? Why? Well, I just wanted one drink. That one drink is picking the chain up. The next drink is putting it on. The next drink is hooking it. Like you're just putting it back on. You're repeating the pattern. And we do this every day with, and I said drinking, but we do this every day with tons of things. Lying, anger, lust, manipulation, greed. You know what I'm saying? We do this every day, every single day. And we wonder why we continually get into these places of such depravity. We get into these places of such sorrow and, Lord, I need you. Lord, I need you. Your life, you are not supposed to live like that anymore. You're not supposed to be like begging him to come through and save you every day. He already did. Yet every day we're sitting here in these places of, God, I'm sorry, save me, help me figure this out. And he's looking at you like I did when I died for you. What are you doing? And we do this. This is what we do. And the unfortunate reality, as you start to understand it, is that some of you, me included possibly, although I refuse, may live your whole life and never leave the wilderness. You may never leave your sinful nature. You might repeat that pattern your entire life. On your deathbed, one last desperate prayer. And then you missed out on whatever he had for you because you never got past being desperate. Like some of you are probably desperate for the Lord today. And whatever he has, you know, whatever you're going through. And, you know, and it's great. You could not be desperate. You could be totally content with your sinful, awful life and be like, you know, skip that. I don't need him. So at least you're desperate for him. But when he comes through, then what? Then what? We go right back to it. We go right back to where we were. Exodus 17, 1-3. At the Lord's command, the whole community of Israel left the wilderness of sin and moved from place to place. Eventually, they camped at, weird word, Rephidim, whatever, but there was no water there for the people to drink. Here we go again. So once more, the people complained against Moses. Give us water to drink, they demanded. Quiet. Now Moses is like, you know what? I'm sick of y'all. I'm sick of y'all. Stop it. Quiet your mouth. Y'all know he gonna do it. He's sick of them already. And why are you complaining against me? Like, why y'all looking at me? Poor Moses. Moses like, I'm just telling y'all what he says. I'm just doing what he does, and y'all mad at me. Like, I can't make him. And he was done with these people already. But But tormented by thirst, they continued to argue with Moses, just arguing with the man. Poor man. Why did you bring us out of Egypt? Like Moses brought him out. Are you trying to kill us, our children, and our livestock with thirst? I'm sorry, I'm laughing because it's just dumb. First of all, when you're desperate and you're in that place, it's never your fault, right? Like it's come on, y'all know it's tell the truth. You know what I mean? It ain't my fault. Look, man, they did it. You know what I'm saying? It starts when you're a kid. You know what I mean? You get pulled over by the cop. We got pulled over the other day. It's our fault. It's totally, like, we got a new car, and when we got the new car, we switched the plates over. And for some reason in my mind, I'm like, both me and my wife, in our mind, we're like, oh yeah, plates are good for like a year, when you buy a new car, But we switched the plates, which means it's just the same plate. So in December, my birthday, my plate's been bad since December. They're bad right now. Amy, don't tell your husband. They're bad right now. And we got pulled over twice now. And both times, because we had no idea. Honestly, we had no idea. I was like, dang, I haven't looked at it. Let me look at my plate. You know what I mean? Like, no one's going to check your plate. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I'm like, we're pulled over. We get pulled over. And he's like, yeah, you've been bad since December. We're like, what? And we did. We felt bad or whatever. But even though it was an honest mistake, it's still our fault. Like, we should have looked into it. We should have took the time. But instead, we're like, someone else will figure it out. Like, it'll take care of itself. Fortunately, we have not received a ticket, and we did finally get blessed with the funds because we didn't have that. And the Lord literally blessed us with $500 out of nowhere. And like that, give a round of applause for that, because that's crazy. Like, literally, we were like, I don't think we're going to make it. And the Lord's like, got you, $500 for nothing. And so, yeah, now we're able to get our plates, and we ordered them or whatever. So cool. But still, it's like, that's our fault, But man, were we quick when the cop pulled us over, like, what? I'm looking at her like, what did you do? You know what I mean? Like, it ain't my fault. Then she's looking at me like, what did you do or not do? And I'm like, it ain't my fault. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then we're looking at the cop like, this is your fault somehow, sir. I don't understand. We bought the car and they didn't say nothing. You know what I mean? Like, we're just out here buying cars. And so, yeah, and then we just start like, and the poor guy, I mean, he's being so nice. And like I said, he let us go. And I'm like, man, but we do. It's never our fault. It's never our fault. Being a little kid, man, it was never my fault. Ask my mom. Don't ask my mom. It was never my fault. It was always Becky's fault, my sister, friend's fault. Mom, they put the cigarette in my mouth. They did. Mom, he grabbed my fist and hit his face with it. I'm telling you, it's not my fault. Never. And we, to the point that we say dumb things like that. Like, it doesn't even make sense. They're like, why did you bring us out of Egypt? Are you trying to kill us? Like, dude just killed an army for y'all. Why would he bring y'all here just to kill you? Make it make sense. It don't. But it ain't their fault that they're desperate. It's not. It's got to be someone else's, right? But all that said, again, like I said earlier, I'll give it to them. They had a little bit of a point. They thirsty. I get it. It's nice to be able to have just some water. So we're thirsty, God. We're thirsty. Sometimes our complaints are justified. They are. Sometimes we are hit with bad things. And we're justified in our complaints. And it's real easy to stay in that place. And before you know it, your honest complaint to the Lord, where you should have been communicating, turns into because it's not our fault. So now we're stuck in this habitual place of complaining. And it's it's a place where your mind stays, and it makes you irrational. You know what I mean? Like how I said, like, why would he kill them? It makes you irrational because it's not your fault, and now you're stuck in this complaining cycle. And that cycle translates as well to just the cycle of desperation I've been talking about. Because if you are constantly desperate for someone to save you because it's not your fault that you got in this situation, you'll just be constantly complaining when that doesn't happen. Until it does, and then, yeah, you saved me, and now I'm going to go right back to it. But it's not enough to just be desperate. Like I said earlier, it's good that you're at least desperate. You know, you're not like content and fine with your trash life and, you know, whatever, and you screw all that noise. You know, like you're not, at least you're here. At least you're desperate enough that you're like, all right, God, if you're real, show yourself. That's a great place to be. And the problem is, like I said, is we often stay there, and he doesn't want you to. But that's a great starting point. But it's not enough. It's not enough. Get out of here, email. You see, what I want to hit on here, though, is the Lord was moving them. You see, they left the wilderness of sin. It says, seriously, these emails, ridiculous. They left the wilderness of sin, which also, funny, like the wilderness of sin. Like, just a side note, the name, like, really? That's funny. At the Lord's command, they left that wilderness, and not the wilderness, but the wilderness of sin. So, I'm trying to make sense of my writing here. You know how it goes, late nights, cramming in. Oh, yeah, okay. So, yeah, they left the wilderness of sin at the Lord's command, not Moses' command or anyone else's, but the Lord's. So, what's interesting about that point is he has been leading them this whole time, away from Pharaoh, then away from Egypt, into the promised land. And as that's being explained to them, it seems really straightforward and simplistic, like, hey, we're taking you from point A to point B. You know, this was bad, this is good, you know, it's going to be awesome. Yeah, great news. And these people, as we already saw, ain't the smartest. So they're like, yeah, we get it. You moving us, that's cool. But as we, as people who have read the Bible, and if you haven't, I'll give you a preview, this whole story is about him forming a people for him. And part of that is that they had to go through this. They had to. You know, they had to go through these trials. They had to be thirsty. They had to, because if they didn't have this stuff, they wouldn't have relied on him. They would have relied on themselves. And that's not what he wanted for this people, because he's setting a foundation in these people of him. So, the Lord has taken them on a journey away from who they were, distancing them from any and everything. That way, they will rely on him and his teaching and not their own understanding. This is why he says, count it as pure joy when you face trials. That's literally why he says it, because everything that they've been going through up to this point is already forming them into different people. You know, and as we continue to read, you'll see that. They were being distanced from Egypt, and well, Pharaoh, and he dead now, big dead. And they've been distanced from them, and they're distancing them deeper into the wilderness, away from who they used to be. And the Lord does that with us. This is the next step, by the way. I didn't do that very eloquently. Like my points, my title, desperate, distant. So you're following me. This is the distant portion. So this is what he highlighted to me in regards to the distance aspect. He showed it to me as two sides. I'm going to start with the first side. The first side is the Lord will distance you from the things that got you desperate. But it takes you following him. All right, God, I'm going to follow you. Just like these guys were following Moses, who was following the Lord. They were now being distanced away from where they were. So they're following him, just like we hopefully are following the Lord, distancing ourselves away from who we once were. And that is exactly as God has planned it. That's part of it. Like, that's what he wants. He doesn't want you to go back to who you were, because you're not. He made you new. You're not that person anymore. So you're being distanced from that. And yeah, sometimes it hurts. Sometimes there's trials. But he's there because you're following him. And he gets you through them. You're distanced from it. Here's the problem, though. Oftentimes, in that distance, we get so, far from what we used to be that we now feel like, I'm not that guy. You're right, I'm not that guy. And I'm never going to be that guy again. I'm going to tell you how. I'm not ever going to look at it. I'm not ever going to talk to it. Them friends, nope, not talking to them. Them people in my life, gone, dead, out, never doing it again. I'm moving. I'm going to church every day. Every day. I don't care if it's open. I'm knocking on the door. I'm going in. No one's there. Cool. I'm distancing myself from everything I was. That's not sustainable. It's not. You can't. I used to tease some friends of mine. I ain't gonna call them out because now I'm a different person. But back then, you know what I mean. Anyway, so they would put themselves in a God bubble. That's what I would call it. God bubble's great. Everybody loves the God bubble. Everything's great in the God bubble. Problem is, it's a bubble. And nobody can get in or out of the bubble. And you're stuck there. In the moment, because there will be a moment, that it pops, or you pop it because of your sinful nature. And before you know it, oh, wow, I've been in a bubble this whole time, still in the wilderness. What do? And it hits you like a sack of bricks. And before you know it, all that distancing means nothing. Nothing. Because everything you were distancing yourself from, you never really learned how to separate yourself from it the right way. You were following God, and then you were like God's going this way. And you were like, oh, we going away from it? All right, I got you. He's like over there. I got you, God. Nah. He's like, where? You left me. Now your bubble popped over here. That's not what I had for you. And you get yourself distant in the wrong way. So that's why I said there's two different sides to it. But we'll continue. So they go, we're not going to read it. I don't have time to read everything. But they go into a battle. Actually, a battle comes to them. And they win, but they only win because Moses kept his hands up. And when they started to get tired, his two homies came and helped lift his hands up, and it was great. And then they won the battle. Y'all should read it. It's good reading. And they kept traveling, and then Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, like that name, Jethro, visited him. He gave him some dope advice about making some leaders, and so he didn't have to deal with it all. Because, like I said, poor Moses, man. This man was stressed out. Y'all really stressing Moses out. And he was like, man, I can't. So he listened to his father-in-law. So in Exodus 18:24-26, oh, I forgot. I didn't maybe give him that one. Nope, there we go. Yep, 24-26, 18. Intermission. Right. Yeah, it's bad. Why'd I wear pants? I don't know. Yeah, there we go. Shh. Can we just let me jump in that thing? No. All right, here we go. So Moses listened to his father-in-law's advice and followed his suggestions. He chose capable men from all over Israel and appointed them as leaders over the people. He put them in charge of groups of 1,150 and 10. These men were always available to solve the people's common disputes. They brought the major cases to Moses, but they took care of the smaller matters themselves. So, seems like kind of like that's cool to know, but why read that? Because as you move farther away from your old self, this is part of the process, is that the Lord will start to form you into a new person. And in that process, he will actually start to give you some responsibility. They were infants, like newborns, like Flora, okay? Tiny itty bitty. And they just maybe got a few months older, spiritually, figuratively. And he's like, all right, y'all can do a little bit of leading. Poor Moses needs some help. So I'm going to go ahead and tell Jethro to tell you this. So the Lord was distancing them further from the people who they were when they were ruled by Egypt. They were becoming their own people. They had a little group. They had some groups now. They had some leaders. You know what? Like, all of them now are probably all sick of these people talking about water all the time. But they're like, hey, we in it. We're with you. We're thirsty too. You know? But as I was saying, they've distanced themselves. They're starting to become a little bit of a culture here, starting to create, some mature. They're starting to mature, basically, and move on to the next things. But because of that, because of now being able to have a little bit of structure, being able to kind of, take care of yourself a little bit, they were distancing themselves from their old self. Yep, good. They are maybe not quite as desperate as they used to be because now they have some leadership. Good. But they didn't get the last part yet. So instead, again, they're just living in this place of desperate and then distant, and then because of that, they lost sight of him. So then, like them, we often do this. We say yes to the Lord, and in that process, we've gone through the journey where we repeated a few times. We were desperate. Lord, I messed up. Forgive me. Got you. Forgot about it. You good. Don't do it again because I forgot about it already. So, yeah, you all right. 10 minutes later, Lord, I messed up. And, you've done this a few times. And he's like, look, all right, I see this is a pattern. This is a pattern for you, my boy. So what we're going to do is we're going to distance you. Follow me. Follow me. Okay, cool. I follow you. And you get plugged in prayer. You get plugged in at the church. You go to church. You got somebody at the pulpit telling you everything I'm saying. Distance yourself. Blah, 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 blah. And they're like, yeah, we can do that. Cool. And then you start doing this stuff. And you mature just a little bit. And then you're like, bet, I got it. I'm good now. Thank you. That's what you just needed me to come to church. That's all I needed. Come to church, listen to a guy a few times, tell me that I got it, we good, bet, all right. And this is what we do, is it not? Yeah, man, this is what we do. We cry at an altar. We give our life for a few days. And then life, we go back to work. We all work, unless you're Caleb and you're lucky. He works for the kingdom. Not fair. One day. Anyway, if you're unlucky like me and have a secular job that you have to go back to, you go back to work and you go back to all the same people, the same relationships, trying to be different, trying to be that distant person, non-desperate person. But then that one girl, who y'all know that one girl, you trying so hard, I ain't looking at her. I didn't look at her. God, I didn't look at her. I ain't look at her. God, I didn't look at her. Yeah. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. And then that look turns into thought, and that thought turns into lust, and that lust turns into a number of things it could turn into. And you are now back repeating patterns. Now back desperate, no longer distant, and you're just repeating it over and over. But Maybe you're lucky and you get into a good place where you have a good leadership at a church and they tell you what you need to hear, and that's follow God, follow God, follow God. Don't follow me. Don't follow Ron, Chris, or Caleb. Follow God. Look to God. Pray to God. And you'll be all right. But the problem is when you distance yourself and you're like, I just need to get plugged in somewhere, but you haven't done anything else in your walk. You haven't put in the time to read the word. You haven't done anything. You're an infant. And you go to the first place. Sometimes, unfortunately, you get unlucky. And you can go to a place where they're not preaching that. It's a sad reality that we have to face at the church today. Unfortunately, there are leaders that don't preach God's word. They might preach what it says in the Bible, but not his words. And before you know it, because you haven't done this last portion to know the Lord, you don't know his voice. And now you've distanced yourself from who you used to be. That's great. You're not desperate anymore, but you're following the words instead of God's words. You're following the words of whoever's your leader or whoever you've clinged to. It might not even be a church. It might be a people group. It might be an ideology. It might be a political party. And because of that, you've now distanced yourself even farther away from the Lord, but think you're right there with him. And this is where we get false teaching, and it really thrives. Before you know it, you have been led astray, and now you might yourself been saved by Christ and now be a part of an antichrist mentality. If your faith is in politics, if your faith is in a person, you might want to reevaluate. If you went to bed at night and woke up in the morning consumed with anger and fear, you might want to reevaluate. You're not following him because that's not of him. We are not here to fix this world. That's his job. And we're not here to worry about it either. If you're up day and night worrying about this world, you're missing it. You need to be focusing on him. Let him guide you. Let him be the thing you're worried on. I'm worried that I'm not close enough to you. That's a better worry than worrying about what Joe Blow is doing or whoever. You know what I mean? You're not going to do anything anyway. Just being honest, you're not. What are you going to do? You're not. You know? I was going to say something I decided not to. Anyway, but my point is, you're not called here to fix the problems of sin and fix the problems of the enemy. You're not good enough. Only he is. So you're here to show his love. You're here to be used by him in that way. But this is what happens when you only distance yourself and not do the next part, and that's get disciplined by him. So, but if you don't know how to get there or how to get to that place, all you have to do, like I said, is follow him. So we will be a church that tells you, don't follow me, follow him. Because if you don't know how to get there, if you don't know how to get there and you've been going here for a long time, you're not listening. Follow him. Talk to him. We can definitely disciple you. We can definitely talk to you. We can definitely pray with you. But we are not making disciples of us. we are making disciples of him. So ultimately, at the end of the day, we are always going to point you back to him. And if you don't like our answer, that's fine. I'm not him. Talk to him, you know? But so these people, they're on their journey. They're distancing themselves. They're starting to become a people. And the Lord saw, like, that's not enough. We got to, like, they're just going to keep repeating the patterns. I already know. Enter the 10 Commandments. Bingo, right? We love the 10 Commandments in the church, don't we? Man. The 10 Commandments, you shall have no other gods before me, number one. Number one. Kind of obvious. That's like really important. You should probably not have multiple gods and then say that you are following him. Number two, you shall not make for yourself an idol. Number three, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Number four, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Number five, honor your father and your mother. Number six, you shall not murder. Number seven, you shall not commit adultery. Number eight, you shall not steal. Number nine, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. And number 10, you shall not covet. So these were the rules. These were the commandments. And again, I don't have time to go into all of it, but you should read that portion because that portion was lit. It was crazy. Like, dude was like on a mountain. God was like, whoa. And like, they were like, oh yeah. You know, it was like, it was crazy. Like, I'm like telling you, like, if I was there, I would have been right there with him. Like, oh my, you know, like, and then they like, this is what's funny is, so the Lord in all his glory spoke to his people. They were big scared. And they were so scared, in fact, that Moses, when he came back or whatever, they're like, Moses, don't let him talk to us. Like, that was terrifying, my boy. Don't let that happen again. And yeah, they were big scared. But the 10 Commandments was the Lord giving them structure, giving them rules, parameters, disciplines. And those were just a few other words that you could throw in there, but ultimately disciplines. You see, we need these things for our own good. You know, he didn't make these rules just to make rules. In fact, later, they missed that point, by the way, because later Jesus came and was like, that's not why That's not why they were here. You know what I mean? That's not like what that was for. But he was like, I'm making these rules to discipline you. There we go. So that you can become a disciplined people, which is part of the process. So just to track back, you get desperate, you say, Lord, help me. He saves you. Hopefully you can stop it right there and start to distance yourself from who you used to be. And if you're following him, he will lead you into his discipline. He will disciple you, and you will become disciplined. And that is the only way you can ever get out of the wilderness, is to be disciplined and discipled by the Lord. So we could navigate the wilderness and move forward through it, but we can only do that with him. Otherwise, we're just going to be walking in circles, like most of us will live our whole life doing, unfortunately, because it says few will enter. Few. And Caleb went into that when he spoke, and that should really scare you. Because it's really easy to sit in this spot and think like, man, I got it. He saved me. I'm good. I'm going to distance myself. I'm good. Yeah, I'm not going to do all these rules. I'm not going to do them. I'm not going to follow them, though, because I'm good. He saved me. And I'm not that guy anymore. I've distanced myself from him. I don't need all these rules. Maybe I'll follow a couple of them. I mean, I'm not going to kill nobody. You know, I'm not going to do that. That's messed up. I mean, I'm not going to like cheat on my wife. Like, I love her. I'm not going to do that. But a lot of us can flash forward to when Jesus came, And he summed these up into two. And he also talked about if you did that thing that I was doing earlier, where I'm not going to look at her, God, you just committed adultery. You lusted after another woman. That's Jesus' words, a.k.a. God. I hate that man. Man, I hate him so much. I can't stand what he's doing to our nation. You just killed him in your heart. He wants you disciplined for your sake, not him, not anything else, but for your own sake. When you are a baby and you start to mature and you start to be able to do things on your own, we have 3 kids. We know what it's like. Silas is right in that stage. You have to introduce discipline. You have to. It's not because you're angry. It's not because you are mad at them and you want to punish them. It's because it's for their own good. They need rules. They crave it, actually. If you do nothing and let your kids just figure it out, which there are some people that have that as a bozo mentality, odds are you're going to have a kid who feels really entitled and is going to grow up in life thinking he can do whatever he wants to do. And he probably will. And it won't be good. And then when he's like old and he's doing something crazy and you try to talk to him, he's like, what are you talking to me for? You never talked to me before. And they look at you dumb because you have to bring discipline into the picture. You have to. And he's forming these people. And he has to discipline them. And that's a lot of what the Old Testament is, just so you know. It's him disciplining and forming his people. And that's why the Old Testament looks kind of rough on the outside, but it's still all love because we discipline our kids out of love. At least you should be if you're a good parent. Some of them, you know. But if you're a normal, good parent. But, although I don't know my kids sometimes. No, I'm just kidding. But, but you discipline them out of love. Your little daughter starts beelining for the road. You're going to freak out on them. But it's because you're like, no, I love you so much. Do you realize that in a split second you could be gone? So you make a big deal out of it. Don't do that. It's discipline, but it's necessary. I just feel like we get to this place where it's like we know these rules, we know these laws, we believe them, we understand God said them, but we feel like we can just throw them away. Once we achieve, like, I'm a Christian, I believe in him, we just like, we're good. Or when we do them, we're just like, oh, yeah, you know what? My bad. All right. And then we just do them again. Because we don't take them serious. But this is why I said earlier, a lot of us will never leave the wilderness. And few will enter into the promised land because we're not taking his stuff serious. We have to become disciples of the Lord. I'm going to ask you, Mike, to put up Hebrews 12, 1 through 13. Without his discipline, guys, we will never be his disciple. And without being his disciple, we will not be there in the end. We just won't. All right. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates, perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. Think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people. Then you won't become weary and give up. After all, you have not yet given your lives in your struggle against sin. And have you forgotten the encouraging words God spoke to you as his children? He said, "My children, don't make light of the Lord's discipline, and don't give up when he corrects you. For the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he pushes each one he accepts as his child. As you endure his divine discipline, remember that God is treating you as his own children. Whoever heard of a child who is never disciplined by his father? If God doesn't discipline you as he does of his children, it means that you are illegitimate and are not really his children at all. Since we respected our earthly fathers who disciplined us, shouldn't we submit even more to the discipline of the Father of our spirits and live forever? For our earthly fathers disciplined us for a few years, doing the best they knew how. But God's discipline is always good for us, so that we might share in his holiness. No discipline is enjoyable while it is happening. It's painful. But afterward, there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. So take a new grip with your tired hands and strengthen your weak knees. Mark out a straight path for your feet, so that those who are weak and lame will not fall, but become strong. With his discipline, we become his disciples. John 15, 1-8. I'll just read it, Mike. I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be faithful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine. You are the branches. Those who remain in me, I in them, will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned. But if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want, and it will be granted. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. This brings great glory to my Father. My whole sermon is in these scriptures. Like I said, some of us may never leave the wilderness. But if we want to, that's how. But unfortunately, the reality, and it's very clear in the Bible, that a lot of us are going to be useless branches. Not my words. I don't know about you, but I do not want to be a useless branch. And I don't want to be desperate anymore. And distancing myself from the past isn't enough. I want to be able to face all of that discipline and able to stand with the Lord and be his disciple. Because if I can do that, then as it says right there, he can then use me to make more disciples. not with anger or fear, not with sadness but with just him. And whatever that looks like for whoever it's for, he can use me, he can use you, but only after you become his disciple. I'm tired of being that person that finds myself on my knees saying sorry, sorry, sorry. And then running to the first holy thing that I can find, hoping that it's God. There's a lot of things out there that look like God, but they might not really be him. Because we at the church have gotten really good at presenting what we think is God, when it's really just emotion. I've seen it with my own eyes. So being distant isn't enough. We have to be discipled. We have to say, God, come, disciple me. I see your rules, and I want to live by them. I was talking to Caleb not too long ago, and we've gotten to this place where we just, we almost act like sin doesn't matter. Like, oh, well, I asked him to come in my life. I'm straight. But like I said, like he said, there'll be few. Sin matters. You can't live your whole life in constant sin and then be there in the end. You also can't live your whole life standing where I'm standing, telling people who or what they should believe, but then walking in sin. Literally talks about that too. Didn't we cast out demons in your name? Yeah, I don't know you. It's not about action or just doing what you think is right or what you've been told or believing what you have been taught to believe. A lot of us grew up in the church and we think that counts. And it's helpful, but it doesn't count. You have to be discipled by him. You. Not your mom. Because of her, now I'm good. No, you. And that only happens by letting him lead you. And that journey is going to lead you to battles. It's going to lead you to thirst. And you can't turn back. And you can't go the other direction. You got to follow him and trust him. So maybe you don't know the Lord or don't really know the Lord that well, but you're tired of being desperate. You're tired of falling and finding yourself on an altar, on your knees, or in your room at night. Man, that room at night hits different, don't it? You sit there trying to close your eyes. And everything that you did that day that you know and you knew then was wrong comes flooding back. And you are desperate. And you say, I'm sorry. I'll be better tomorrow. But you're not. If that is you, and you are done repeating that pattern, I'm going to invite you to come up here. And I'm going to invite my prayer team, Caleb. It's really just Caleb because I'm already up here. And in a minute, I'm going to open up the altar. But if that is you and you're tired of repeating this pattern of desperation, I'm going to invite you to come up here and we're going to pray with you. But before you do that, I have another one. Maybe you have ran from your past life and you've distanced yourself from that person. You got plugged in here or been plugged in at other places, and whatever reason you're here today or what led you here in a time. But because of that fact of just only distancing yourself and not being discipled by the Lord, you don't know what to do. You don't know where you're going. You have no trajectory. But today, you want the Lord to become the thing discipling you. You want to be his disciple. I'm going to invite you as well to not just be that person who distanced themselves from their past life and their past ways, but also wants to be discipled by the Lord. That's me. That's what I'm trying to walk out right now. And everybody else here is too. We're trying to be discipled by the Lord. So, I'm going to pray. And at that time, I'm going to open up the altars. And I'm going to invite you to come. So, Father, we just thank you for today. We thank you for your word. I know it's hard to hear. I know some spots were rough. But Father, we welcome your discipline. We welcome your transformation. Lord, we don't want to be the same people that pick up our chains every day and re-put them on and then beg you to take them off of us and then do it again and again. We don't want to be that people anymore. We want to be a people that are desperate for you, not just in moments, not desperate for a thing from you, but desperate for you. I'm running from who I was, but I am following and chasing after you. We want to be that person. So, Father, let us be that person. We thank you for this day, Lord. We thank you for this time. And we just invite you here to do what you do. Thank you, Jesus.